Hi, Joe Reilly back with our ongoing series on collector training, the DOT urine specimen collector training. And today we're going to talk about flaws in the process, what we call correctable flaws, and what we call fatal flaws. So we'll talk first about correctable flaws. So correctable flaws are kind of things that you may have missed on filling out the form correctly, but they didn't really have a serious adverse effect on the collection process. And with the correctable flaws, you'll get an affidavit, or what's sometimes called a memorandum of record. You'll get that back from the laboratory, and you'll have to fill out, what was done wrong or what they said you didn't fill in properly, and sign off that you understand that this needed to be done right and that you'll do it right in the future. And then you send back that affidavit, or what's called memorandum for the record, back to the lab, and then they finish up the testing. So be aware that when there is a flaw, a correctable flaw, even though it's correctable, your specimen is at the lab and it's not being tested until they get that documentation back from you about the correctable flaw. It needs to be back to the lab within 5 days of the time when they sent it, 5 business days. So it's always best, if you get one of these memorandum for the record, that you send it back right away. If, for example, you're on vacation and you have a manager at your collection facility, that manager can talk to you on the phone, and that manager can sign off on that memorandum for the record and send it back in. So the important thing is that we get the process moving and get your specimen tested, because the employer is waiting for the results. Now, what are some of the examples of the correctable flaw? Well, maybe you forgot to check the box for the temperature is in range or not in range. So maybe you didn't check something. Maybe you forgot to check the box for direct observation when there was a direct observation. Maybe you didn't sign your name. Maybe you didn't print your name, one or the other. Maybe the donor didn't sign on copy 2 or didn't initial the specimen bottles, and you didn't put anything in the remarks about that. So that's just another example of a correctable flaw. It's kind of a paperwork issue, an administrative mistake, and those things can be corrected. Again, the lab sends you a memorandum for the record, and you kind of disclose what happened, you sign off on it, send it back to the lab, and the process moves forward. Remember, as a collector, you're always responsible to do everything possible to get the specimen tested and get that collection completed so that a result is reported out to the medical review officer and then to the employer. Now, let's move on to what we call fatal flaws, okay? Fatal flaws are mistakes, flaws that cause the test to be canceled at the laboratory. So when there's a fatal flaw, the laboratory cancels the test. They send a canceled result to the MRO, the medical review officer. The MRO sends a canceled result to the employer. And at this point, nobody's happy. The employer's not happy. They got a canceled result. The employee or applicant's not happy because they may have to go back for another test. You're not happy because you're now going to have to go through what's called error correction training. So when you have a fatal flaw, you have to go through error correction training. And your employer's not happy because this whole process has caused something where you're not going to get paid for that collection. It was done in error. There's a fatal flaw. So what's error correction training? Well, it has to be completed within 30 days from the time of notification. The MRO will typically notify you. You don't have to stop doing collections. You just have to get this error correction training done within 30 days. And the error correction training is training on the error that was made, what was the fatal flaw. And so you receive training on that error, and then you also complete 3 mock collections, proficiency demonstration, showing that you understand how to do this collection properly. You'll do 1 uneventful mock collection and 2 that are related to the error. Those must be done in front of a person who monitors mock collections. Someone who's a trainer, someone who's completed a train-the-trainer course, someone who's been doing DOT collections for at least a year. Now, what are some examples of a fatal flaw? Okay, well, number 1, you don't sign your name on the custody and control form, and you don't print your name. Nobody knows who you are. That is a fatal flaw. Okay, so that's one example. Number 2, the specimen ID number on the security seal on the vial doesn't match the specimen ID number that's on the custody and control form. Why wouldn't they match? Well, it could be a printer mistake, but that's highly unlikely. One time we see where this happens is a collector is doing more than 1 collection at one time, which should never be done. Always 1 collection at a time, and then there's no reason why the specimen ID number on the security seal would not match the specimen ID number on the custody and control form. Same goes if you're doing an electronic collection. The specimen ID number on the labels must match the specimen ID number that's on the computer screen for the test that you're doing as an electronic chain of custody. Another example is if you send into the lab a specimen with insufficient quantity. Remember, we need 15 milliliters in the B bottle. We need 30 milliliters in the A bottle. If the lab doesn't get enough specimen per DOT regulations, 45 milliliters total, they will cancel the test for insufficient quantity. Another example is if the specimen seal or seals on the bottles, on the specimen vials, are ripped, torn, or appear to be tampered with. Remember, affixing those specimen seals to the bottles is sealing them up and providing a custody and control, a chain of custody, that these bottles are sealed, they remain sealed until the laboratory has them. If they're ripped, torn, or appear to be tampered with, the lab will cancel the test. That will be a fatal flaw. So those are some examples of the fatal flaws. Again, they're going to require error correction training. The best way to avoid a fatal flaw is to take your time, do the collection right, follow the DOT collection steps in order, 1, 2, 3, 5, 4. Check your work carefully before you seal up the packaging and send it off to the lab. So this was part of our collector training series. We talked about correctable flaws and fatal flaws, and we hope that you never have a fatal flaw.